Today we look at Isaiah 41, 44, 49. So much material to look at there in terms of our subject matter, to serve and to save. And of course, that immediately takes us to the idea of the suffering servant. Before we get there, there's so much material in between that we shouldn't miss either. I just wish we would take more time studying Isaiah and looking at all the passages we're just passing over so quickly. Isaiah 41 is talking about God's servant Israel and how they were supposed to lead people to the Lord and to be an encouragement to all the nations. And Isaiah 41 is this encouragement to Israel. Isaiah 42 is another servant. And it's clear that this is speaking about an individual, not the collective group of Israel. Listen to this at the beginning of Isaiah 42. Look, here is my servant, the one I support, my chosen one who pleases me. You remember what the Father said about the Son right at Jesus' baptism and also at the Transfiguration. So think about that, the one who pleases me. I have placed my spirit on him, and he will show the nations what is right. He won't shout or cry out. He won't raise his voice in the street. He won't break a damaged reed. He won't snuff out a smouldering wick. He will faithfully make sure everyone is treated fairly. He won't give up or to become discouraged until he has made sure that justice is upheld throughout the world. Even lands overseas will look forward to his teachings. So there we have what you might call a messianic prophecy. Prophecy about Jesus, the Messiah, when he comes. This is the kind of person he will be, representing God, of course. And this material here about his lack of violence, his kindness, his faithfulness, treating everybody fairly. This is what God is really like, as revealed in Jesus. All the misconceptions that people have had, especially in the time of the Old Testament, are done away with when Jesus comes, when the Messiah comes to represent the true God to everybody here. And, well, we could go through and look at some more of this material in 43 and in 44. 44 begins, but now listen, Jacob, my servant, Israel, the one I've chosen. Here we go back to the collective Israel and the representation of the servant through the nation. Verse 3, I'm going to pour water out on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I'm going to pour out my spirit on your descendants and my blessing on your children. It's a positive aspect of what God is going to do through his people. And this is how the Messiah is to come. And the tragedy of all of this is, as Isaiah has to warn them, don't give me formal worship. Don't ignore me. Don't reject me, because I am the one who wants to bless you just like water in the desert. I want to give you all that is good. And here we see what God really is wanting to do through serving, saving Israel and the Messiah who comes through Israel. I think we have to look at all of that. Isaiah 44 takes us to a very different perspective. It's another servant. This one is named very specifically as Cyrus. Isaiah 44, 26 to 45, verse 6. It's a prophecy that's addressed to Cyrus, who comes on the scene a century later after this prophecy, which is why so many scholars who don't believe in prophecy say, well, this must have been written after the event, and so they talk about a second Isaiah and all those kinds of things. Mainly because of this prophecy of Cyrus, because they, well, that couldn't possibly work out the way it is. I personally believe that God does know the future, that he can see that Cyrus is going to do that, and in fact he has planned this. And of course this is the way in which the nation of Israel, after the captivity, begins to be redeemed and brought back to Israel. At least those ones who want to come. The tragedy of the restoration of Israel after the exile is that so few want to come back and to play that role of serving and saving. So as we think about this, let's consider what our role is to be as spiritual Israel, and what our role is to be in trying to help people to see the wonderful good news of God, our Saviour. Let's think about this, not treat this simply as history, but as something very meaningful for us today.